LiberalViewer presents.
So welcome to the January 22nd edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out a couple dozen of the best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really educational, informative, fair use, media criticism, and political analysis show for you all tonight. As usual, my clips come mostly from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the Big Five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. I also have both my big sources of political comedy. Real Time with Bill Maher came back last night. You can actually watch the whole episode live streamed on YouTube at a link I put down in the video description. Saturday Night Live was also back with Aziz Ansari as the host. I thought he was pretty funny, including the monologue, which is what I'll start off with in just a minute. Some excerpts from his monologue, although the entire monologue is also available at a link down in the video description on the Saturday Night Live YouTube channel. I've also put a link in the video description to the clip list I use while I'm going through the show. There are also 3 topics that I am going to be covering. Mostly the biggest topic will be Trump dividing America now that Donald Trump is president, and how divisive he's been after his inauguration, which I covered with a clip roundup on Friday. He's been even continuing to be divisive and not really reaching out, and he got in this weird, big and strange and weird conflict with the press, attacking them for actually factually reporting the size of the crowds at his inauguration. And if you look down in the video description, that's the second topic I'm covering, the crowd size topic. And then there are a couple clips at the end about his speech at the CIA and how he continued he also had some attacks on the press talking to the CIA and some falsehoods that he was telling, and that his press secretary Sean Spicer came out and told, and the whole women's march, and that may be what was part of his reaction to the whole crowd size thing. I put links down in the video description to the time indexes that you can click to if you're watching as a recorded show to go in between the subjects. Including going to, if you want to go to the crowd size topic and skip to and not watch the entire Division of America topic, that's up to you. But I also appreciate all my live viewers who've shown up, and I'm going to give you I think 2 or 3, start off with 2 political comedy clips, both of them from, actually 3 political comedy clips, 2 of them from Saturday Night Live, one from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher on Friday. I'm going to start with a few excerpts from Aziz Ansari talking about how Donald Trump has divided America, giving sort of a soft take on Islamophobia, and I thought some really funny jokes in his stand-up routine. I'm a big fan of stand-up, as I've talked about for quite a while on the show, and so I want to give you about 4 minutes and 20 seconds of Aziz Ansari's monologue. If you want to watch the whole thing without any editing, you can click down on the link I talked about in the video description. Here are my favorite parts that I'll talk about with you after we watch it together here.
Wow, I can't believe this. I'm here hosting Saturday Night Live. Yeah. The day after Trump's inauguration. Pretty cool to know, though, he's probably at home right now watching a brown guy make fun of him, though, right? The problem is, there's a new group. I'm talking about this tiny slice of people that have gotten way too fired up about the Trump thing for the wrong reasons. I'm talking about these people that as soon as Trump won, they're like, we don't have to pretend like we're not racist anymore! We don't have to pretend anymore! We can be racist again! Woo! Whoa, 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 whoa! No! If you're one of these people, please go back to pretending. You gotta go back to pretending. I'm so sorry we never thanked you for your service. We never realized how much effort you were putting into the pretending, but you gotta go back to pretending. I know it's been a rough couple of years. Obama, Empire, Hamilton. It's just been hit after hit after hit. Star Wars movies where the only white characters are stormtroopers. I get it. It's been rough. But you gotta stop. You know who I'm talking about. There's like this new lowercase KKK movement that started. This kind of casual white supremacy. Oh, let me put my foot in the pool and see how cold this water really is. No, I'm talking about these people that are running around saying stuff like, Trump won, go back to Africa. Trump won, go back to Mexico. They see me. Trump won, go back to where you came from. Yeah, they're not usually geography buffs. Lowercase KKK, man. They're out there, you know? Hate crimes and stuff are on the rise. You know, as far as people in my own skin tone, brown people, I think part of the problem is a lot of these people, they just haven't interacted with any brown people in their normal life. The only people they see are these monsters in the news who are just a drop in the ocean, you know? Maybe what needs to happen is when they do the news report, they should do a second report about some other brown people that are just up to normal stuff just to calm those people down. So the report's like, the suspects are considered armed and dangerous. Not armed and dangerous, these 4 other Muslim people that are eating nachos in Chicago. Let's go to footage of them. Looks like Nasir just spilled a little cheese on his khakis. He got a little overambitious with that last dip. We've all been there. I think Trump should make a speech, a real speech, denouncing the lowercase KKK. Don't tweet about me being lame or the show being lame. Write a speech, a real speech, because these people are out there and it's pissing a lot of people off. And I think it can make a difference, because other presidents have done things like this and it has helped. Hate crimes and stuff, and went down. You know, George W. Bush made a speech after 9/11, and it really helped. Things changed. This is what he said in the speech, and I'm paraphrasing slightly. He said, Islam is peace. The perpetrators of these attacks, they don't represent Islam. They represent war and violence. Our enemies are not our Muslim brothers and sisters. Our enemies are a network of radical terrorists. And everyone applauded. Democrats, Republicans, it didn't matter. Because it's not about politics. It's about basic human decency and remembering why the country was founded in the first place. And I'm sitting there, and I'm watching the speech, and I'm like, what the hell has happened? I'm sitting here wistfully watching old George W. Bush speeches. Just sitting there like, what a leader he was. 16 years ago, I was certain this dude was a dildo. Now I'm sitting there like, he guided us with his eloquence.
So Aziz Ansari, I think, was funny. I think he did a good job in the sketches. I thought Saturday Night Live overall was funnier this week than last week. Last week, other than the cold open, and a couple jokes on Weekend Update, I thought was pretty bad. I saw someone in the comment section before I started the show saying that I should feature the Kate McKinnon, Kellyanne Conway musical sketch, but I normally don't do things that have music in them because it creates all sorts of extra copyright problems, and I have enough copyright problems as it is. But I thought Aziz Ansari, like I said, brought really good comedic instincts, and I think he was well prepared for all of his acting roles in the skits, which is not something you can say about a lot of the guest hosts. A lot of the guest hosts seem to be reading their lines off of cue cards, and he seemed to put a lot of work into, and I think got a lot of good comedy out of his effort. So I put a link down to the NBC website where you can watch the entire episode, and also the Saturday Night Live channel on YouTube. Last night was also the premiere of Bill Maher, since right around the time of the election, I can't remember, sometime in November he went off, I think November, December, I think he went off on vacation in November. He just came back on Friday night, and I really enjoyed his jokes also in his monologue, especially about the inauguration and how dark it was, which I already reported on Friday myself. And I wanted to show about minute and 20 seconds of the real-time monologue. As I said, they streamed the entire season premiere episode on YouTube, and it's currently available. I put a link for that down in the video description. Here are the jokes I liked from the monologue, talking about Donald Trump's inauguration and the contrast between Trump and President Obama over here.
And Trump, did you know this is true? Trump used 2 Bibles in case the first one burst into flames. No, then it was time to make the big inaugural speech. And, you know, all the pundits, before he was going on, were saying, oh, it's going to be classy and uplifting and unifying. At what point are people going to realize that there is no normal president inside the Trump fat suit? That's it. That's who it is. First of all, the speech was 16 minutes long. I know that sounds short, but that's over 100 tweets. And it wasn't, and it wasn't classy or unifying. It was joyless and ugly and divisive. And the theme, if I could find a theme, was once you go black, you can go back. Mic drop. By the way, for all you racists out there, if you saw that shot of the new president standing with the outgoing president and their families, the one with kids by 3 different women was the white one. And Trump, did you know this is true? Trump used 2 Bibles in case the first one burst into flames.
Oh, wow. Sorry, looks like the clip restarted there for some reason. I didn't realize it was going to do that, but I thought that those were some good jokes there I like the Bible joke at the beginning, and I like the comparison between Donald Trump and President Obama in terms of who really has the family values that Republicans claim to stand for. I also saw, along the way, I was reading the live comments from my live viewers, and I saw this one from Clip Culture. Claiming that Bill Maher was high on Friday night and that showed that he was in a happy mood. And I don't know if you can really tell whether Bill Maher was high or not, although at some point in his new rule that I'm going to show later about the pillbillies, the way that Republicans have been using drugs, and in part of the clip I'm not going to show, he talked about how they have to learn how to manage their high, and that's something he's been doing for the entire show, or he made some reference that made it sound like he was actually high during the show, so maybe Clip Culture is right about that. And before I get to the actual news clips about how divisive and combative the Trump administration started off in the first couple days, possibly in reaction to this women's march that was so successful yesterday, I want to show one more clip about the divisiveness of Donald Trump from Saturday Night Live last night. This is a joke from Colin Jost. Oh no, I'm sorry. This isn't Colin Jost. This is a clip from Michael Che talking about the Women's March, and especially talking about what he thinks feminism is. And the Women's March is kind of about how Trump has been divisive, but this is also a topic that comes up over and over again in my comment section, in my videos. I know there are a whole bunch of anti-feminist atheists out there, which I don't really understand, because feminism is really just believing in equality for women, which is sort of what Michael Che says in this 80-second clip from Weekend Update over here.
The Women's March in Washington was held today. It's estimated that the turnout was twice as big as the inauguration. But, you know, size doesn't matter. Am I right, ladies? No, I'm not right? It's the #1 thing? Oh, okay. It was an amazing show of support for feminism. But some feminist groups were actually asked not to march because of their pro-life views, which raises the question, what makes a feminist a feminist? It's confusing. My mother raised 7 kids by herself. She's the strongest woman I know. So I asked her if she was a feminist, and she said, boy, God made Adam and Eve. And I was like, that's not what that means. A feminist is really just someone... Feminist is really just someone who believes in equal rights for women. And that's easy to get behind. That is until you see an actual feminist screaming into a cop's face wearing a homemade uterus hat, and then you're like, oh, there are levels to this. I just think it's weird to get a special name for just being a reasonable person, because that's all it is. Believing in equality just means you're not a dick. And for me, that's enough. I support women's rights for the same reason I won't let my cousin Rob Collin. It's because I'm not a dick.
I don't know about that last part about robbing Colin Jost. Was that some sort of inside joke, or I don't know, that maybe it's just some sort of like racial allusion in terms of, well, anyway. I did like the definition of feminism that Michael J. came up with there, and the idea that it just means believing in equal rights for women, but he also brought up what I'm sure the anti-SJWs in my audience would say about how it's women screaming in your face and, angry women, men hating women, or, of course, that's not really what feminism is. And I also like Michael Che's definition. It just means not being a dick, which I guess has sort of different levels of meaning on it the more you think about it. But I wanted to include that because I thought that was something I didn't see in any of the other coverage, not even from the corporate news media. No one really talked about the women's movement very much, or the meaning of feminism. That there was a brief mention of the fact that pro-life women weren't allowed to march in this women's march, but I think, at least as far as I'm concerned, that kind of makes sense because it's a march. It's kind of like the national organization for women isn't the national organization of women. It's not the people who are women. It's the people who believe in the rights of women. That's that's what the march was about. And one of the rights of women is to choose. You can choose to be pro-life, but if you are pro-life in the sense that you don't believe that other women have that right to choose, then you don't really believe in women's rights. I guess that's my opinion, but you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I'm now going to get to the actual news coverage about Donald Trump's divisiveness and his obsession with the size of the crowds and the way he took on the media. And I'm going to show 4 of the 5 corporate news outlets reporting on this, starting with NBC's Meet the Press. And then later, when I get to the crowd source, the crowd size argument, I'm going to show 2 different clips of Chuck Todd getting in this huge battle with Kellyanne Conway about the size of the crowd and why it is that the Trump administration came forward with these falsehoods about the size of the crowd. And that's also indicated in this report from Chuck Todd at the beginning of the program. This is a little under 5 minutes, but I think it's worth watching the whole thing because I guess it lays out NBC's position in this possible upcoming war between the media and Donald Trump, as I will discuss with you after we watch that clip together over here.
Remarkable of inauguration weekends at a time when a new president took the oath of office and hundreds of thousands of people gathered on the Washington Mall to celebrate. The big stories turn out to be the massive demonstrations sparked by the inauguration of Donald Trump, and then the head-scratching decision by President Trump to pick yet another fight with the press. Across the country and around the world, more than 2 million people, mostly women, took to the streets to fight for women's rights and to rebuke President Trump. In some cases, officials had to cancel planned marches because the demonstrations themselves were too large for the planned route. The huge crowds clearly rattled the White House. Late in the day, on his first full day in the job, the new press secretary, Sean Spicer, gathered reporters, took no questions, and then flatly accused the media of lying, intentionally lying, to understate the size of Mr. Trump's inaugural crowd.
This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period, both in person and around the globe.
Spicer says the pictures tell the story. So here are the pictures. On the left is a shot taken from the Washington Monument moments before noon, the day of President Obama's first inaugural. The photo on the right is moments before noon on Friday from the same camera. Which crowd is larger? All this came a day after President Trump's inaugural address, which delighted supporters with its plain-spoken bluntness, very Trumpian, and will be remembered domestically as the American Carnage speech, and its images of a country as a wasteland of crime, drugs, and rusted-out factories. Around the world, it will be remembered as the America First speech. But it was the marches, in their stunning size and scope and number, that stole the weekend. In Washington, D.C. and around the nation, from New York City to Boston, Chicago, Seattle, Los Angeles, and even every continent around the world, millions of women marched in protest. The message, a historic rebuke to Mr. Trump and a declaration of feminism in a polarized America.
Thank you for understanding that sometimes we must put our bodies where our beliefs are.
With signs, many made of poster board, often with kids in tow. Women and some men showed up in other cities: Houston, Indianapolis, Miami, Phoenix, Denver, even in Juneau, Alaska, and Little Rock, Arkansas. Women crowded the Capitol steps. The giant throngs may have actually prompted President Trump to complain that reporters underplayed the size of his crowds.
But we had a massive field of people. You saw that. Packed. I get up this morning, I turn on one of the networks, and they show an empty field.
Mr. President. A country divided, fully on display at Friday's inaugural as well. Among President Trump's supporters, there's hope.
It's really exciting. There's a vibe in the air.
Making history on Change America. I think this is going to be a dizzying 100 days, first 100 days.
But 70% of Americans believe that under President Trump, divisions will continue or get worse. Past presidents in divided times have reached out to opponents. Nixon during the Vietnam War.
We are caught in war wanting peace. We're torn by division wanting unity. We cannot learn from one another until we stop shouting at one another.
George W. Bush after a disputed election.
And sometimes our differences run so deep, it seems we share a continent, but not a country. We do not accept this.
But Mr. Trump's 16-minute inaugural address, crafted by advisors Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller, while pleasing supporters, was a declaration of combat. Mr. Trump presented a dark, dystopian picture of the country he is inheriting.
Forgotten men and women trapped in poverty, rusted out factories, deprived of all knowledge. The crime and the gangs and the drugs. This American carnage stops right here and stops right now.
President Trump proposed a solution more populist and nationalist than it was conservative. His rallying cry?
America first.
Is borrowed from Charles Lindbergh, though Mr. Trump and others have rejected Lindbergh's isolationism and anti-Semitism. Around the world, some foreign leaders were rattled by President Trump's America First declaration, worrying it means a new jingoism and an end to U.S. commitment to international agreements and institutions. And joining me now.
So that was the NBC coverage of Donald Trump's first weekend after the inauguration, and it kind of mirrors some of my coverage of the inauguration on Friday. If you're watching this as a recorded show, I'll put a link down in the video description to my video, Trump's Dark Inauguration Speech, that also shows how the different networks covered it. I noted that on MSNBC, within 2 minutes of the beginning of their coverage of the inauguration speech, they got to Hitler and World War II, and it was basically through that America First thing that you just saw Chuck Todd get to in his NBC report on Donald Trump's first weekend. But now I want to move on to somewhat similar coverage, and this is going to be to contrast to the Fox News clip I'm going to show afterwards, where the next one's ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where they also talk about the falsity of what Donald Trump said at the CIA and the falsity of what Donald Trump's press secretary Sean Spicer said about the crowd size as this inexplicable way that the Trump administration decided to start out their first weekend by attacking the press and attacking, facts themselves, I guess. And I will talk about that a little more after we watch it together, before we watch Fox News really soften and downplay the same facts. But here's the ABC version of what you just saw from NBC over here.
Extraordinary start to this new presidency. The day after his inauguration, President Trump met with massive protests. Hundreds of thousands in the Capitol for the Women's March on Washington. Hundreds of thousands more in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. Cities across the country and around the world, from Paris to Sydney, Australia. The president ignored the protests, but on his first full day in office, he used his bully pulpit to deny reality, declare war on the press.
I have a running war with the media. And they sort of made it sound like I had a feud with the intelligence community. And I just want to let you know, the reason you're number one stop, it is exactly the opposite. Exactly.
Reports of a feud were based on Trump's own statements. During the transition, he accused the intelligence community of conducting a political witch hunt, questioned their, quote, intelligence. He suggested the CIA director leaked damaging material on him and compared the agencies to Nazis.
I think it's a disgrace. And I say that, and I say that. And that's something that Nazi Germany would have done and did do.
Trump also inflated his inaugural crowds at the CIA and opened a new front with the press.
It looked, honestly, it looked like 1.5 million people, whatever it was. But it went all the way back to the Washington Monument. And I turn on, and by mistake, I get this network. And it showed an empty field. And it said we drew 250,000 people. Now, that's not bad, but it's a lie. So we caught them, and we caught them in a beauty. And I think they're going to pay a big price.
Hours later, the president sent Press Secretary Sean Spicer to the podium for his first White House briefing, where he called the press reckless, shameful, accused some of sowing division with false narratives.
Yesterday, at a time when our nation and the world was watching the peaceful transition of power, and as the president said, the transition in the balance of power from Washington to the citizens of the United States, some members of the media were engaged in deliberately false reporting. This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period, both in person and around the globe.
The facts say otherwise. There on the left is Barack Obama's first inauguration in 2009 at noon. On the right, the matching shot for Donald Trump's inauguration at the exact same time. According to the Nielsen ratings, 30.6 million people tuned in to watch Trump take the oath of office. That is more than 4 years ago, but fewer viewers than Obama in 2009, and both were dwarfed by Ronald Reagan in 1981. And Washington Metro officials say they had about 571,000 riders on Inauguration Day. That's down from 782,000 in 2013 and more than 1 million in 2009. Spicer closed the briefing with a warning.
There's been a lot of talk in the media about the responsibility to hold Donald Trump accountable. And I'm here to tell you that it goes two ways. We're going to hold the press accountable as well.
Spicer then left the briefing room without taking any questions. But this morning we do have Counsel to the President, Kellyanne Conway. She is here this morning.
And I'm going to show you plenty of Kellyanne Conway clips. I promise. I think there are like 5 or 6 of them before I get done. Maybe even 7. I haven't counted them up. But I want to finish showing 4 of the 5 corporate news outlets' coverage of the divisiveness of Donald Trump's first weekend. I showed you NBC and ABC. You noticed they both showed you Sean Spicer making false statements. They showed you Donald Trump making false statements to the CIA, and they fact-checked them and told you what the facts were. They even showed those pictures. The pictures of how many people were out on the Washington Mall during the inauguration. That doesn't show up in the Fox News report, and they're much softer when it comes to Donald Trump's false statements about his feud with the intelligence agencies. They do kind of fact check that. They say, he said said there was no feud despite the fact that he had this feud earlier, or he'd said these things feuding with the intelligence officials earlier. That's in the John Roberts report. But they don't show the Sean Spicer press secretary clips where he says the false statements. Instead, they only show the part at the end where he is confrontational with the press, and they don't really fact check anything he said. Chris Wallace later will do a little bit of fact checking and show the pictures when he talks to Reince Preibus, and that's over in the crowd size topic. But in the initial report, it's a lot softer in terms of fact checking Donald Trump on Fox News, as you might expect, because it is, of course, your most biased source of news, your least fair, least balanced news source. Even on the supposedly straight news programs with supposedly straight news anchor Chris Wallace and supposedly straight news reporter John Roberts, as you will see if you compare this Fox News clip to the NBC and ABC clips I just showed, and we'll watch that together here.
Trump's inaugural celebration was barely over when hundreds of thousands of women took to the streets of Washington and cities around the world to protest against the president. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump went to the CIA to repair a rift with the intelligence community, but also attack the news media. An attack his press secretary, Sean Spicer, continued last night. In a moment, we'll have an exclusive interview with new White House Chief of Staff, Reince Preibus. But first, let's bring in Fox News Chief White House correspondent John Roberts with the continuing debate over the Trump presidency. John.
Chris, good morning to you. It was quite an afternoon yesterday in the Trump administration, the new Trump administration, showing that it is quickly going to push back hard against any press reports that are either incorrect or even not to their liking. In his first official statement from the Brady briefing room yesterday, Press Secretary Sean Spicer ripped the press for a false report that President Trump had removed the bust of MLK from the Oval Office and for reports that the crowd for Trump's inauguration appeared far smaller than those of President Obama in 2009.
These attempts to lessen the enthusiasm of the inauguration are shameful and wrong.
It was a theme that his boss had hit on earlier, speaking to 400 employees at the CIA. Despite his repeated statements calling into question the quality of U.S. intelligence, President Trump insisted any feud with the intelligence community was a fake news story invented by a hostile media.
And they sort of made it sound like I had a feud with the intelligence community. And I just want to let you know, the reason you're number one stop, it is exactly the opposite.
But the fact that he talked about the size of the crowds in front of the stars of the fallen incensed outgoing CIA Director John Brennan, who was, quote, deeply saddened and angered at Trump's despicable display of self-aggrandizement. Outside the White House, meanwhile, and in cities across America, millions of women took to the streets to voice their displeasure with President Trump's election at the Women's March.
I have a daughter, and, you know, our feeling is that what we saw in the election really demonstrated an attitude towards women that is, you know, pervasive and unpleasant, and we really need to show our solidarity against that.
And a short time ago, President Trump offered his own assessment of his visit to the CIA, tweeting, quote, had a great meeting at CIA headquarters yesterday, packed house, paid great respect to the wall, long-standing ovations, amazing people, win. Chris?
John Roberts.
So it's again Donald Trump adopting the Charlie Sheen policy of winning at the end there from John Roberts. But I think you saw from Fox News there something I talked about last week, that even though they are apparently going to be supporting Donald Trump and softening their criticism of Donald Trump and his administration as much as possible, they still have to come to the defense of the intelligence agencies and the military. Those are like some of their key constituencies, in addition to, you know, the Republican Party, which they're basically the communications arm of the Republican Party. So that's why they support Trump, but they still have these allegiances to the CIA and other defense agencies and intelligence agencies. And that's why I think you saw that John Roberts did kind of contrast what Donald Trump said about not feuding with the intelligence agencies with what he really said, and did sort of come to their defense there, but there wasn't as much defense of the rest of the press when it came to the size of the crowds and Sean Spicer attacking the press. They didn't really fact check on that topic, although I will show Chris Wallace fact check on that a little bit later. But before I get to some of the guest clips, I want to show one more news story on the divisiveness of Donald Trump. This is Jake Tapper starting off CNN's State of the Union, where he actually tries to be a little bit nonpartisan, I guess, in saying the State of the Union is getting to work, because that would be the State of the Union that the Trump administration might want to have you believe is what's going on, that they're getting, even though I think they're way behind on a lot of stuff. But then he gives a brief, like minute, 20-second synopsis of Donald Trump's weekend, and it does the fact-checking that you didn't see on Fox News and that you did see from ABC and NBC in those previous clips, and I will talk about that with you after we watch that minute, 19-second clip together from CNN's State of the Union this morning over here.
Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is getting to work. The Trump era has begun after an eventful and unique weekend here in Washington. Celebration as President Trump was sworn in. But also loud protests on the same streets where the Trump family had paraded just one day before. As the Women's March headed to the White House, President Trump made his way to Langley, Virginia, headquarters of the CIA, where, in addition to praising the intelligence officers and officials before him and assuring them that he was behind them 1,000%, the president falsely claimed that the media had concocted his feuding with the intelligence community leaders, and he spent a, shall we say, trailblazing amount of time talking about his crowd size.
We had a massive field of people. You saw that. Packed. I get up this morning, I turn on one of the networks, and they show an empty field. I said, wait a minute. I made a speech. I looked out. The field was, it looked like 1.5 million people.
We asked the Trump White House for a member of the new administration to join us this morning, but they declined. I am joined now by the leader of the opposition, Senate Minority Leader.
So he goes to Chuck Schumer because, as Jake Tapper points out there, CNN did not get anyone from the Trump administration on their show on the first Sunday of the Trump administration. And if you remember at Trump's first press conference, or his only press conference during the transition, he lashed out at CNN and called them fake news. And I don't know if that's why CNN did not get anyone from the Trump administration. The other 4 corporate news outlets all got someone. 3 of them got Kellyanne Conway, and I'm going to start showing Kellyanne Conway clips in a minute. And then Fox News didn't get Kellyanne Conway, but they got Reince Preibus, who's the chief of staff. So CNN was the only network that did not get someone from the Trump administration. Is that because they were called fake news after breaking the so-called Russian dossier story? Even though they never mentioned the whole golden shower allegations, they just mentioned that it had personal and financial information and that Donald Trump had been briefed about it or had been included in the documents in the briefing he got on the Russian hacking scandal thing. But you can let me know what you think as to whether that's the reason there was no one from the Trump administration on CNN this morning in the first Sunday of the Trump administration. But I do want to show one clip from CNN's State of the Union where they got the closest they could to a Republican who would defend Donald Trump and his supposed outreach. Or this is, well, first Jake Tapper compares these 2 tweets that Donald Trump put out about the Women's March. The first one is really critical, and then the next one, it's like, did Donald Trump actually write that tweet? When I first saw these 2 tweets together, I was thinking, is it Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Trump? Later, David Axelrod, right after this clip, I'm not going to show the David Axelrod part, but he says it's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Tweet. But here's Jake Tapper showing those 2 tweets, the mean one and the nice one, and then getting Republican representative from Utah, Mia Love, give a plea for outreach that so far doesn't seem to be happening based on the Women's March. And this is Donald Trump being mean to the Women's March and then nice to the Women's March, I guess, over in this clip.
We can whine or we can fight back. Me, I'm here to fight back.
Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren at the Boston Women's March yesterday. Huge crowds gathered around the world to speak out against Donald Trump and his agenda. But is it the beginning of a new protest movement or just a day-long affair? The panel's back with me. Nina, you were at the march in D.C. Let me put up these new tweets from President Trump on the subject of the march. Quote, watched protests yesterday, but was under the impression that we just had an election. Why didn't these people vote? Celebs hurt cause badly. And then just a few minutes ago, another tweet. Peaceful protests are a hallmark of our democracy. Even if I don't always agree, I recognize the rights of people to express their views. It is a legitimate question, I have to say. Why didn't these people vote? I'm sure a lot of them did, but I bet a bunch didn't.
Oh, good God.
You I assume, were not participating in any
I
of
was
the
not
marches.
participating. I took a run with my husband, and, it was very difficult to get through. So we...
But you are somebody who has had concerns about President Trump during the campaign. I know you're rooting for him now, as
yes.
every American is.
Yes.
But What did you make of the marches?
Well, I can tell you one part of that tweet is true. A lot of the celebrities did not help. Madonna dropping the F-bomb over and over again. I would not have brought my child to that event. I think that Scarlett Johansson, for instance, there's a window there where she said, I didn't vote for you, but I want to support you. And I think that that's where we need to start coming together at this. What can we do? The next step is what can we do to help support women? And I'm not just talking about, I'm talking about allowing women to become entrepreneurs. My daughter wants to be a rocket scientist. What can we do to make sure that we empower our young women to become whoever they want to become, to have as many opportunities as possible to contribute to their communities, to their state, and to their country?
And David, there is an opportunity here for...
So that's Utah Republican Mia Love talking about the kind of outreach that Donald Trump hasn't done, although she did also attack Madonna, which I'm going to show Kellyanne Conway attacking Madonna in the next clip. But before I get to that, did you notice when Jake Tapper, first he showed the tweets and then I did a little editing to cut out one of the guests, but to show the question to Mia Love, but do you see that he premised his question on the assumption that you, like all Americans, are hoping for, or was it hoping for Donald Trump to succeed? I don't know if all Americans are hoping he succeeds, but that seems like a weird thing for Jake Tapper to premise his question on. But I now want to move on to my first of several Kellyanne Conway clips. This is also about the Women's March. This is talking to George Stephanopoulos on ABC's This Week This Morning, where he asked Kellyanne Conway about the Women's March, what she thought of it, and one of the things she does is attack Madonna, kind of like you saw Mia Love do in that last clip. She talked about the profanity-laced celebrities, and then by the end of this, she's actually saying that, well, she doesn't say that Donald Trump is going to investigate Madonna for saying that she often thinks about blowing up the White House. I watched the clip of what Madonna actually said, and she said, like many of you, I've often been thinking about blowing up the White House, but I'd never do it, or something like that. And you'll see Kellyanne Conway says, well, I've read in some articles that the Secret Service might be investigating her, which seems odd for someone in the administration that is in charge of the Secret Service to say, but I will talk about that with you a little bit more after we watch that 2-minute clip from ABC This Morning over here.
What did the president think of that march?
I discussed it with him briefly. We certainly respect people's First Amendment rights, but I frankly didn't see the point. I mean, you have a day after he's uplifting and unifying, and you have folks here being on a diatribe where I think they could have requested a dialogue. Nobody called me and said, hey, could we have a dialogue? And you have celebrities from the podium using profanity-laced insults. You have a very prominent singer who's worth hundreds of millions of dollars not going over to a women's shelter here in D.C. to write a check, but instead saying that she's thought of, quote, burning down the White House.
Talking about Madonna?
Well, this is destructive, and I read in an article or two that the Secret Service may be investigating that. But, George, we just had an election, and a lot of what I heard from this march yesterday in Washington, we heard all through the election. And that whole messaging, and their candidate, Hillary Clinton, lost. 29 to 30 million women voted for Donald Trump. Their voices are heard as well. They should be respected. I just thought they missed an opportunity to be about solutions and to really fight for those millions of women whose kids are trapped in failing schools, who don't have access to health care, who don't have access to an economic, affordable life. And those are the people that we're here for, the forgotten men, the forgotten women, and their children. And I just thought it was such a contrast to have President Trump deliver an inaugural address that was so uplifting and aspirational and inclusive of American, if you open your heart to patriotism, there's no room for prejudice. And then the very next day, you have these profanity-laced, threatening, vulgar comments coming from the podium. Look, the whole celebrity thing didn't work for Hillary Clinton. She tried that in her campaign, and it failed. So, and the other thing I would just mention, George, is guess who was conspicuous by their absence yesterday? President Obama, Secretary Clinton. They were up on the platform applauding and embracing President Trump. They weren't here marching with women.
Final question. You mentioned.
So I don't think that Donald Trump's speech was uplifting, which I heard Kellyanne Conway say over and over again in the 3 different shows she appeared on. That was one of the, I guess that's an opinion, so it's not really a lie, but if you watch the speech, it's an opinion that's very difficult to justify. And she also seemed to imply there that Madonna might be investigated for the Secret Service for a statement that really wasn't a threat, not a legal threat in terms of the criminal law. I'm telling you based on my experience as a criminal defense attorney, saying, like many of you, I've been thinking a lot about blowing up the White House, but I guess I would never do it, or something. I can't remember the exact quote, but it's pretty close to that. And that's not a crime. I'm sorry to tell you, Kellyanne Conway. But I actually want to show you this 80-second clip from Reince Preibus over on Fox News Sunday, where he said something that showed more outreach than anything else I heard from either him or Kellyanne Conway over the course of all their interviews this morning. It was on a question about DACA, it's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, what some people call the Dreamers. This is undocumented immigrants who were brought here as children, a lot of them when they were really young, and they've grown up as Americans by, they're, except for documentation, they are, for all intents and purposes, Americans. A lot of them don't even speak the language from the country that they could be deported to, and there are, I think, 700,000, I can't remember, hundreds of thousands of these dreamers who signed up to get work permits, legal status under the Obama administration by executive order, and Trump could take it all away and deport people from all over the United States, and that would be really divisive. And it sounds like, if you read between the lines of what Reince Preibus is saying here, if you trust what he's saying, which I'll just wait to see what happens. I don't really know if he's going to get the Trump administration to do what he wants or not. But here he says that they aren't going to immediately deport the Dreamers, which I guess that would be a good way to reach out to people who didn't vote for Donald Trump. But we can discuss that a little after we watch that clip here.
Let's turn to what he's going to actually be doing this week. Monday, he says, is his first full day of work, although he's already done quite a lot already. What do you know what executive actions he's going to sign tomorrow and this week? And specifically, is he going to undo DACA, the Obama executive action that deferred deportation for the 700,000 so-called dreamers who were brought into this country illegally as children?
Well, on the last one, I think we're going to work with House and Senate leadership as well to get a long-term solution on that issue. But
so he won't undo DACA until he...
I'm not going to make any commitments today, but I obviously foreshadowed there a little bit. But I think this week we're going to talk about trade. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit more tomorrow. I think we're going to talk about immigration this week, and we're going to have a time of national security, a conversation about that, obviously with General Mattis.
Will he undo some of the Obama executive orders?
I think you're going to see more of that coming, perhaps this week, executive orders on those 3 topics. Thursday, we're expecting to make an appearance at the Senate House Leadership Conference in Philadelphia. So it's going to be a full week, and this president is going to work hard. I mean, I've never seen anyone work harder and have more energy than this president.
President Trump.
Well, I guess that also remains to be seen, but it would be nice if Donald Trump started off his administration by not signing an executive order to deport hundreds of thousands of people who have grown up in the United States and are basically hardworking, contributing members of our community, even though they happen to be undocumented. That is one of the things I've worried most about. I mean, the things I worry about based on Donald Trump becoming president are people getting hurt that I either know personally or know about through my work in support of civil liberties, or just reading about other people who are working in support of civil liberties. You know that there are all sorts of people threatened by Donald Trump's promises, immigrants and Muslims right at the top of the list, so that would be a nice way to do outreach. Another way I think that Donald Trump could do outreach is through the Supreme Court appointment that's supposed to happen in the next week or two. I don't expect there to be outreach. I actually think that is going to be another thing that's going to be really divisive, which is why I put these next few clips on the topic of the Supreme Court appointment in the they're really in the topic of divisiveness. The first clip I want to show is like a 3-minute discussion from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, where he talked about the way they should really oppose this. And there's a comment from Tom Perez, the former Obama Secretary of Labor, who's now running to be head of the Democratic National Party or Democratic National Committee. And then there's also a historical footnote that I think is actually kind of important from John Meacham, a historian and author. And I'll discuss all of those comments after we watch that clip from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher on Friday over here.
I want to ask about the Supreme Court. Now, I'm on record for the government functioning. It's good for property values. But when Justice Scalia died, Mitch McConnell reached into his ass and pulled out a piece of paper that said, you know, apparently the presidents are supposed to get to pick the nominees if someone dies while they're in office, but that's just the Constitution talking. So, I mean, if there's any way the Democrats can block it, Ted Cruz said there is certainly a long historical precedent for a Supreme Court with fewer justices, to which I say, great, I'll race you to one.
Well,
should not, there can't be two rules. There can't be, if this thing where the presidents pick and we each get a turn, that's out the window. This is where the Democrats have to, I think, start doing what they did. Even if
three quick points on that, Bill. Number one, if the choice of cabinet picks is a bellwether of what they're going to do on the Supreme Court, Katie barred the door, which is why, number two, Democrats have to be strong. They still have the filibuster on Supreme Court nominees, and you shouldn't hesitate to use it. And number three, you got to look back to Robert Bork. That's why we've got to tell the story. A woman's right to choose is at stake. Dark money, the continuance is at stake. And you know, when Robert Bork was nominated, 6 Republicans ultimately voted against him. And so that's why we've got to, they're going to nominate someone who's way off to the right. That we've already seen it. Let's not fool ourselves.
But even if they don't, Obama didn't. Obama nominated Merrick Garland. He was a centrist candidate who many of them were for before Obama nominated him. And they just kept up with their idea from day one, we're going to obstruct everything. And until we get back to a place where both parties are playing by the same rules, I'm sorry, but the Democrats, I think, have to do that. They have to be assholes too.
At the risk of total self-parody, we need to go back to the Federal Judiciary Act of 1789.
You don't have to tell us about that.
John. Republicans love original intent, right? The first Judiciary Act gave us 6 justices. Thomas Jefferson raised it to 7 in 1807. We've only had 9 since U.S. Grant. So if you really like the way it was way back then, let's go to 7 and see what happens.
And we'll vote them off the island to take the theme from the president and make it into a show.
Okay, but on that score...
Justice Apprentice.
That's it.
But on that score of...
Arnold Schwarzenegger can be in that, too.
Right. No, John just did the beautiful voice.
Yeah.
No,
You're not nominated. Sorry.
That's not bad.
It is.
So what they're discussing there, I think it could come down to what John Meacham was talking about, that over time we may end up with less than 9 Supreme Court justices. As he pointed out, it's basically up to Congress to set the number of Supreme Court justices, and if they don't confirm justices for a long period of time and they start dying off, then there will be less than 9, and there's nothing in the Constitution. You can look yourself if you have a copy of the Constitution. Like, here's my copy of the Constitution. It happens to be an ACLU copy of the Constitution. You can get your own copy of that at the ACLU shop online at aclu.org. Just a little plug there. But if you look in there, it doesn't say there's supposed to be 9 justices. It's up to this Congress to set the number of justices. And if we get into some big, long fight, that may happen, although it's just as likely that the majority in the Senate would decide to get rid of the filibuster. But Chuck Todd has said, not Chuck Todd, Chuck Schumer has said, the Senate Minority Leader, the head Democrat in the Senate, has said that he will block a Supreme Court nominee with the filibuster, that the Democrats will do that unless it's a moderate nominee. That's something that Bill Maher was saying, that even if it's a moderate nominee, they should block the nomination. But here's Chuck Todd appearing over on, this is ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. I'm sorry. This is on CNN State of the Union, where Chuck Todd plays a clip of Chuck Schumer appearing on the Rachel Maddow show, where he said that they would obstruct as best they could any nominee who wasn't moderate. You'll see Jake Tapper actually cuts down the clip from MSNBC, so it seems like Chuck Todd said he would block anything, but he's basically saying he's going to block anything that he thinks the Republicans would approve because they won't approve anyone who's moderate, which is what I remember him saying on Rachel Maddow. And anyway, here's that clip of Chuck Schumer over here.
Let's turn to the Supreme Court. You recently said that you are absolutely willing to keep open that 9th seat, the Scalia seat on the court. Take a listen.
It's hard for me to imagine a nominee that Donald Trump would choose that would get Republican support that we could support. So you're right.
And so you would do your best to hold the seat open?
Absolutely.
You would do your best to hold the seat open?
If the nominee...
Yeah.
Let me just say this. What I said on that show was if the nominee is out of the mainstream, we will do our best to keep the seat open. Let's remember that of the last 4 Supreme Court nominees, 2 nominated by a Republican president, 2 by a Democrat, they had bipartisan support. What I said, you didn't show it on the air there, is if the nominee is not bipartisan and mainstream, we absolutely would keep the seat open. I'm hopeful that maybe President Trump would nominate someone who is mainstream and who could get bipartisan support. We shall see. But if they don't, yes, we'll fight it tooth and nail, as long as we have to.
As you know, for the last 4 months, President Trump has had a list of 21 potential Supreme Court picks. He worked with the Federalist Society on the list. He says they're all conservative judges. Are you saying that not one of the judges on that list of 21 is in the mainstream?
I haven't studied the records of those 21. I'm not going to comment on a potential nominee. I'm going to wait to see who the president nominates. My only plea to him, hope, nominate a mainstream person, not someone way out of the mainstream.
I want to ask you about...
So that's Chuck Schumer reiterating the fact that Democrats will block a non-mainstream candidate appointed to the Supreme Court. I don't really expect Donald Trump to nominate someone who is mainstream. I think he will nominate one of those 21 judges approved by the Federalists and conservative. It's why all the evangelicals supported Donald Trump, despite the fact that he's generally such an immoral person in his personal life and all the other things. But they wanted that Supreme Court justice, so... and he announced this list of conservative Federalist Society approved judges. And so I think that Chuck Schumer is going to try to obstruct it, and the Democrats will try to obstruct it. As to whether they're going to get rid of the filibuster, that's a question that the majority leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, the whole Toby the Turtle guy, he does do his... patented stick to your answer no matter how often they ask the question. Is like the Senate will confirm the nominee. Yup, he's gonna confirm the Supreme Court nominee. Yup. That's basically my Toby the Turtle impression. Sorry, that's one of the few impressions I think I can actually do, so I included that. But here's Mitch McConnell saying he won't say that they're going to get rid of the filibuster for Supreme Court nominees, but he does say that they're going to confirm whoever Donald Trump nominates, talking to Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday this morning here.
He wants to name a Supreme Court nominee. He's talked about doing it within 2 weeks. And Senator Schumer has said that they are going to block anyone that they don't like, that they feel is outside the mainstream. As Senate rules now stand, because the nuclear option was extended on a partial level in 2013 by the Democrats, you can confirm lower court judges with just 51 votes,
Right.
a simple majority, not a supermajority of 60 votes. If the Democrats block a Supreme Court nominee, are you going to extend the nuclear option to Supreme Court nominees? Because now they still need 60 votes.
Well, let me just say I'm confident we'll get the Supreme Court nominee confirmed. I expect an outstanding nominee sometime soon. I think it's noteworthy to look at how the Republican minority handled Bill Clinton, in his first administration. Both of his first two nominees, Ginsburg and Breyer, no filibuster. Obama, in his first term, two nominees, no filibuster. We think our nominee ought to be treated the same way. If he is not treated that way, then under the current Senate rule, we would have to get cloture. That is, we'd have to get 60 votes. We had to do that with the Democrats objecting to Justice Alito 10 years ago, but cloture was invoked. Sorry for the long answer. I think the short answer is the nominee will be confirmed.
But would you consider extending the nuclear option and saying even for Supreme Court justices, just a simple majority?
The nominee will be confirmed.
One thing I've learned with you, Senator McConnell, is once you've given an answer, you're going to stick with that. Thank you. Thanks for coming in today. Busy times ahead, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Up next, we'll bring...
So Chris Wallace did ask that question multiple times. I guess that's kind of confrontational, and he did keep getting that answer. But there were two words, or a two-word name, or a name that should have been brought up in that conversation that I thought was not brought up, with Mitch McConnell talking about comparing how Supreme Court nominees were treated in the first term of Clinton, and but who was not mentioned in any sort of cross-examination by Chris Wallace there? Merrick Garland. Why didn't he ask Mitch McConnell about the treatment of Merrick Garland in the way that it's been how many 100 days or whatever it is that Merrick Garland did not even get a hearing? So I think that's one of the reasons Democrats are so fired up to resist and oppose a Supreme Court nominee, especially the one that Donald Trump is likely to make, because he started off his nominations and now his actual presidency in such a divisive, confrontational way. And before I leave the subject of divisiveness, I want to show a couple more clips. This one I wasn't sure quite how to categorize. This is HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, the new rule at the end, where Bill Maher talked about the whole pillbilly phenomenon and who it is that Donald Trump is talking to and their hypocrisy on drugs, which I thought was kind of funny. It doesn't quite fit into the divisiveness topic, but it does have kind of a lead into the final divisiveness clip I'm going to play after this, before I get to the finally get to the size of the crowd topic, which I think is in ways more interesting. But anyway, here's Bill Maher in his new rule talking about pillbillies over here.
Inauguration Day, in the interest of new beginnings, liberals have to stop calling Trump voters rubes and simpletons and instead reach out and feel their pain. The pain they insist we didn't see. And there is ample evidence for that pain. Did you know that of the 14 states with the highest number of painkiller prescriptions per person, they all went for Trump? Trump won 80% of the states that have the biggest heroin problem, and the counties that he won in Ohio and Pennsylvania that went for Obama last time are the ones that are racked by opiate abuse. So let's stop calling Trump voters idiots and fools and call them what they are: fucking drug addicts. Now, if that sounds like I'm actually not reaching out, I promise I will. But first, I have to get something off my chest about this phenomenon of white conservatives on drugs. And the numbers are phenomenal. West Virginia was Trump's best state. And in the past 6 years, folks there have downed 780 million hydro and oxycodone pills. That's 433 pain pills for every person in the state. West Virginia's mascot is a dilated pupil. In Wisconsin, another key Trump state, between 2008 and 2014, heroin deaths nearly quadrupled. I never thought I'd hear myself say this, but kids, don't do heroin. It's a gateway to being a Republican.
So could that be it? Could heroin and opiate drug abuse be the reason that Donald Trump got elected? That's kind of a novel type theory as to the Donald Trump phenomenon, but you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But in some ways it would explain people who accept the type of explanations you're going to see from Kellyanne Conway in this next clip. This is the last clip on the subject of divisiveness before I finally get to the crowd size controversy from the inauguration. This is Kellyanne Conway answering a question on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where he asked about the emoluments clause and whether Donald Trump is finally going to release his tax returns, because there was an online petition that at the White House that they're supposed to answer if there's 100,000 people who ask. This is in response to what Kellyanne Conway said about taxes on a show last week, that, only reporters care about the taxes, not the actual people. So 100,000 people signed a petition. And what's really interesting about this answer is what Donald Trump kept saying during the campaign was he wasn't going to release his taxes because of the ongoing audit, but he was going to when the audit was over. You'll notice nowhere in this answer, nowhere in this clip does the word audit come up. Apparently that former statement is no longer operative. The new position of the Trump administration is they're just never going to release their taxes. At least that's my interpretation of this next clip. You can tell me what you think after we watch that last clip that I somehow categorized in the divisiveness category over here.
Trump.
Final
They weren't
question.
here marching with women.
Final question. You mentioned a couple of the 100,000 people who sent in petitions on health care, talking about health care. You also have more than 200,000 who petitioned the White House calling on President Trump to release his full tax returns with all information needed to verify emoluments clause compliance. Whenever 100,000 petition, that triggers a White House response. So what is the White House response?
The White House response is that he's not going to release his tax returns. We litigated this all through the election. People didn't care. They voted for him. And let me make this very clear. Most Americans are very focused on what their tax returns will look like while President Trump is in office, not what his look like. And you know full well that President Trump and his family are complying with all the ethical rules, everything they need to do to step away from his businesses and be a full-time president. But on this matter of tax returns, people they want to keep litigating what happened in the campaign. People want to know that they're going to get tax relief, and he has promised that. We just hope the Democratic Senate will support his tax relief package the way the Democratic Senate in 2001 did for President Bush, George. They passed tax relief for all Americans by June of that year. We hope the same happens here. President Trump has appointed 21 of his 21 cabinet nominees, and only 2 have been confirmed. It's really time for Democrats to step up and stop talking about bipartisanship and be bipartisan when it comes to passing that tax reform so that Americans' tax returns look better this year, and confirming these nominees. We need a Treasury Secretary. We need a Commerce Secretary. We need a new government that works, and we hope they'll meet the call very soon.
Thank you, Kellyanne. I know you have to go. Just for the record, I know that the Office of Government Ethics has cleared Jared Kushner, saying he's in full compliance. There are still questions of the overall conflict of interest rules with the White House right now and the president, but we do not have time for that today. Kellyanne Conway, thanks very much.
So you tell me, does it sound like Donald Trump is no longer going to ever release his tax returns? We're never going to know the important information about who he owes money to and where he gave his charitable contributions, if any, that sometimes he brags about being so charitable. But, well, I mean, there are all sorts of things that we would learn from the tax returns. And based on that, I think if you can understand a Kellyanne Conway answer, I guess, sounds like there's not going to be any sort of release of the tax returns, even when Donald Trump is no longer under audit, which was kind of a bogus excuse to begin with. By the way, I was reading the live comments along the way. I think this was a live comment during the previous Kellyanne Conway clip, possibly. But this is from Topher PSU3 about Kellyanne Conway answering questions. Love to hate Kellyanne Conway and how obtuse she is. Well, I think the word obtuse definitely applies, and that will become even more apparent. So like I said, that's the last clip in the divisiveness category, even though I was only vaguely in that category, I guess. But so the next category is the really surprising category of Donald Trump apparently being obsessed about size, the size of the crowds at his inauguration, and using it as a way to attack the press in a way that maybe is like the very beginning of a huge First Amendment crisis where Donald Trump does things that go above and beyond what the executive branch should be able to do in terms of the press. But so far it's just delegitimizing and trying to say that the press are liars by saying things that are just patently not true. And you saw a lot of that fact-checked in the news reports that I showed at the beginning of the divisiveness category. Now I'm going to show some specific clips on that, starting with some political comedy clips. The first one is Colin Jost making a joke about that, and then after that will be another Saturday Night Live clip with Beck Bennett doing his Vladimir Putin impression in the cold open. But first, here's the weekend update Colin Jost joke about crowd size here.
Just hours ago, Sean Spicer made his first appearance as White House press secretary, and he seemed a little defensive about how many people came to watch Trump's inauguration.
This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period.
Here's how I know he's lying, in addition to photographic evidence. I don't trust anyone who ends a sentence with the word period. Imagine if someone said, "Look, I'm a doctor, period." I'd be like, I don't think this van is a real hospital.
So yeah, that was just mocking Donald Trump or Donald Trump's press secretary Sean Spicer for the use of the word period, which I guess he deserves to be mocked for so much of what happened in that press conference. And I want to show even a better mocking. I thought this was longer cold open. There's a link down in the video description to the whole Saturday Night Live cold open with Beck Bennett, and then there's also Kate McKinnon doing her Russian lady impression that was kind of funny. But this is my favorite. What is it, about 49 seconds of the cold open where Donald Trump, where the Vladimir Putin parody by Beck Bennett makes fun of Donald Trump for his obsession with the size of his crowds, and then also for the darkness of his inaugural speech over here.
Donald, let's talk as friends. You're not off to a great start, man. I thought you'd be better at this. However, I'm glad to see so many people showed up to your inauguration. Oh, wait, that's the Women's March. Here is inauguration. And today you went to the CIA and said 1 million people came to see you in Washington, D.C.? If you're going to lie, don't make it so obvious. Say you are friends with LeBron James, not that you are LeBron James. Yeah. And I saw your speech, too. It was a little bleak, no? Trust me, I know bleak. I wake up every day and I'm in Russia.
Yeah, that I thought the cold open was funny. Like I said, I thought a lot of Saturday Night Live was funny, and I especially like that, you say you're friends with LeBron James. You don't say you are LeBron James, because that's basically the level of dishonesty that's coming from the Trump administration just in the first weekend. You saw Saturday Night Live there showed a picture of the mall, and over on NBC's Meet the Press, this is the same picture that comes from the report I showed at the beginning of the divisiveness category. Here, this is one of several versions of that same photo on the left. This is you'll see that Chuck Todd will show this to Kellyanne Conway in the next clip I'm going to show. This is one of two clips in which Chuck Todd has an epic battle with Kellyanne Conway, and basically this is taken from the Washington Monument just before noon in 2009, and then just before noon 2017. Barack Obama versus Donald Trump. It's pretty obvious which one is a larger crowd, but that doesn't stop Kellyanne Conway from disputing the falsehoods that Sean Spicer told in his press conference. And by the end of this clip, I don't know, it sounds like Chuck Todd and Kellyanne Conway might be breaking up. This is like almost this breakup conversation. You'll see when he keeps calling it a falsehood and trying to press her on why Sean Spicer started off his relationship as the press secretary by saying several things that were false. She said, we have to reevaluate our relationship. So I think they might be breaking up, as I will discuss with you after we watch that. This is one of the two clips. Together, the two clips are like almost 10 minutes. This is the 6-minute, 18-second part. Epic battle between Chuck Todd and Kellyanne Conway this morning over here.
Let me begin with this question. The presidency is about choices. So I'm curious why President Trump chose yesterday to send out his press secretary to essentially litigate a provable falsehood when it comes to a small and petty thing like inaugural crowd size. I guess my question to you is, why do that?
Chuck, the president did many things yesterday and the day before that are very meaningful to America. He signed executive orders to stop Obamacare and all of its problems. Millions of people have lost their insurance, their doctors, their plans. So that stops right now. He's going to replace it with something much more free market and patient-centric in nature. And on this matter of crowd size, I mean, for me, I think the most quantifiable points of interest for Americans should be what just happened a few months ago that brought him here, the 31 of 50 states he won, the 2,600 counties, the 200 counties that went for President Obama that now went to President Trump, and the fact that 29, 30 million women voted for Donald Trump for president. They should be respected. Somebody should cover their voices as well. I'm about things that are quantifiable and important. I don't think ultimately presidents are judged by crowd sizes at their inauguration. I think they're judged by their accomplishments, and we know that President Obama and his accomplishments, so there's a lot of unfinished business there. And on this matter of crowd size, I think it is a symbol for the unfair and incomplete treatment that this president often receives. I'm very heartened to see Nielsen just came out with the ratings, 31 million people watching the inauguration. President Obama had 20.5 million watching his second inauguration 4 short years ago. So we know people are also watching the inauguration on different screens and in different modes. And that there was, I mean, for me, there was a prediction of a downpour of rain. I think that deterred many people from coming. But no question, there were hundreds of thousands of people out on the mall.
All right, Kellyanne, let me stop you here because you make a very reasonable and rational case for why crowd sizes don't matter. Then explain. You did not answer the question. Why did the president send out his press secretary, who's not just the spokesperson for Donald Trump? He also serves as the spokesperson for all of America at times. He speaks for all of the country at times. Why put him out there for the very first time in front of that podium to utter a provable falsehood? It's a small thing, but the first time he confronts the public, it's a falsehood?
Chuck, I mean, if we're going to keep referring to our press secretary in those types of terms, I think that we're going to have to rethink our relationship here. I want to have a great open relationship with our press, but look what happened the day before, talking about falsehoods. We allowed the press to come into the Oval Office and witness President Trump signing executive orders. And of course, you know, the Senate had just confirmed General Mattis and General Kelly to their 2 posts, and we allow the press in, and what happens almost immediately? A falsehood is told about removing the bust of Martin Luther King Jr. from the Oval Office. That's just flat out false. And
it was corrected immediately.
Chuck, why was it said? Chuck, why was it said in the first place? Because everybody is so presumptively negative.
Climb into the head of that reporter.
No, that it's okay. No, excuse me. Oh, no. That reporter was writing on behalf of the press pool. That falsehood got spread 3,000 times before it was corrected.
Excuse me.
And it's still out there.
It does not excuse, and you did not answer the question.
I did answer your question.
No, you did not. You did not answer the question of why the president asked the White House press secretary to come out in front of the podium for the first time and utter a falsehood. Why did he do that? It undermines the credibility of the entire White House press office on day one.
Don't be so overly dramatic about it, Chuck. You're saying it's a falsehood, and they're giving Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that. But the point remains.
Wait a minute. Alternative facts? Alternative facts, 4 of the 5 facts he uttered. The one thing he got right was Zeke Miller. 4 of the 5 facts he uttered were just not true. Look, alternative facts are not facts. They're falsehoods.
Chuck, do you think it's a fact or not that millions of people have lost their plans, their health insurance, and their doctors under President Obama? Do you think it's a fact that everything we heard from these women yesterday happened on the watch of Barack Obama? He was president for 8 years. Donald Trump's been here for about 8 hours. Do you think it's a fact that millions of women, 16.1 million women, as I stand here before you today, are in poverty along with their kids? Do you think it's a fact that millions don't have health care? Do you think it's a fact that we spent billions of dollars on education in the last 8 years, only to have millions of kids still stuck in schools that fail them every single day? These are the facts that I want the press corps to cover, and this is why I'm here at the White House.
I understand
to change
what I don't
awful
understand
numbers
is
like that.
That is not what yesterday was about. So you have not answered the question. You did not answer the question.
It's what this presidency is going to be about.
You sent the press secretary out there to utter a falsehood on the smallest, pettiest thing.
I don't think anybody can prove that. Look, I actually don't think that. Maybe this is me as a pollster, Chuck, and you know data well. I don't think you can prove those numbers one way or the other. There's no way to really quantify crowds. We all know that. You can laugh at me all you want, but I'm very glad.
I'm just
Chuck,
befuddled.
Well, but you are, and I think it's actually symbolic of the way we're treated by the press. The way that you just laughed at me is actually symbolic of the way, very representative of the way we're treated by the press. I'll just ignore it. I'm bigger than that. I'm a kind and gracious person. But let me tell you something else. I'm really glad that NBC News and Chuck Todd all of a sudden are so thrilled to cover crowd control, because we were mocked daily for talking about the significance of our historic rallies during the campaign. Donald Trump brought in historic crowds to Michigan, to Wisconsin, to Pennsylvania, to Florida, to North Carolina, and on great days we were ignored, and on most days we were mocked. And those crowds did matter because he built a movement the likes of which people haven't seen.
What I don't understand is why he's litigating this. Why stand in front of a memorial?
And Chuck Todd there starts talking about the intelligence community speech that Donald Trump made rather than the Sean Spicer press conference where the 4 or 5 facts were wrong. And I think he did a really good job there of trying to stay with the question, why the falsehood, why come out with the falsehood. And the answer from Kellyanne Conway, she definitely didn't answer the question. And some of the things she said there were pretty laughable. I noticed several of you in the live comments along the way were noticing the big key phrase that was most laughable in that answer. Here's John Capone. John Capone there, alternative facts. That's pretty laughable, actually. I guess that's what the exclamation point means, that you're laughing at the phrase alternative facts. That, I mean, is that like the new Trump phrase? What in Trump world, what you call a falsehood is alternative facts? And she did seem to really be attacking Chuck Todd there, and although he did laugh a couple times, but it is laughable. And you would think that Chuck Todd had tried to be as tenacious as possible, trying to get the answer to his question. He did give up on a couple things there, some like different distractions. She mentioned about the Nielsen ratings and compared the Nielsen ratings to Obama's second inauguration. You saw in the ABC report earlier that the Nielsen ratings for Obama's first inaugural were even better, and Reagan was even better than that, because that's back when people only watch things on TV. But like I said, you would think that Chuck Todd was done with his tenacious asking of the question, why the falsehood, why stick to the falsehood, why come out with the falsehood. Well, after they talked about the intelligence speech, or the speech at the CIA that Donald Trump gave for a few minutes, for some reason I was really surprised Chuck Todd actually came back and asked the same question again, This clip is, about 3 minutes, 40 seconds, a little bit under that. So this is like the other part of the 10 minutes of trying to get Kellyanne Conway to admit that the crowd size was a false story, and she doesn't, of course. And it's the end of the interview, and again, she questions the relationship. So, like I said, maybe they're breaking up. You can let me know what you think by after we watch the end of that interview together over here.
I want to go back to a question that you continue to deflect. Why was it necessary to send out the press secretary on his first day in office to utter a provable falsehood that now calls into question everything the press secretary will say from here on out? It will for many Americans.
No, it doesn't. You want them to hear that. You want them to hear that I'm not answering your questions, which I'm doing. You want them to hear that they can't trust our press secretary. I think that is a very dangerous statement to me.
What was the motive to have this ridiculous litigation of crowd size?
And now you're casting it, and your job is not to give your opinion, Chuck. Respectfully, your job is not to call things ridiculous that are said by our press secretary and our president. That's not your job. You're supposed to be a news person. You're not an opinion columnist.
Can you please answer the question? Why did he do this? You have not answered it.
I'll answer it this way. I'll answer it this way. Think about what you just said to your viewers. That's why we feel compelled to go out and clear the air and put alternative facts out there.
It's a political tactic to come up with alternative facts and try to set up the press as your enemy?
No, I didn't say that at all, and that's not why I'm here in this building. I'm here because of all the provable, quantifiable facts, because of the devastation and destruction in our schools, with our health care, in our economy, with our small business owners, and yes, certainly with terrorism, our infrastructure. This guy's going to do so much in the first week. He's going to talk to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today about the Middle East, about Iran. He's going to end the week receiving Prime Minister Theresa May from the UK here, his first foreign leader to be received here. They're going to help renegotiate U.S.-UK trade. But you want to talk about things the media doesn't want to cover. You totally missed Brexit and Theresa May. You totally missed Trump's campaign. You want to talk about provable facts. You've missed it all along. America doesn't really... I mean, look, you've got a 14% approval rating in the media that you've earned. You want to push back on us, and yet you have a 14% approval rating.
All I'm looking for is an answer to a simple question. You never answered why or the motivation of what was necessary about doing that yesterday.
Tell me why you just referred to us as ridiculous. Tell me why we were lied about with the MLK bus.
I think the debate is ridiculous, and I did not say anything about ML. You're a Look. You're deflecting in order to avoid
NBC covered that false report. NBC covered that false report, as did 3,000 other articles that are still up online. Chuck, you can't have a press coming into the Oval Office on day one of the administration. We welcome them in to be open and gracious and to have a great relationship with the press. They came in, and the press pooler wrote a false article about the removal of the bust of Martin Luther King Jr. days after President Trump met with Martin Luther King III, Martin Luther King Jr.'s son, in New York City, and had a very constructive, open conversation where Martin Luther King Jr.'s son said, we have to unify and help heal the country together. And boom, any snarky attempt to try to undercut this president in the Oval Office while he's doing the business of the country. I mean, we can't have this kind of relationship.
I completely agree, but I'm sitting here trying to answer basic questions, and you're trying to attack me with some...
I'm not attacking you. You attacked us as ridiculous.
With some weird Twitter feed that you guys are obsessed with. Look, I'm going to have to leave it there. You have another interview to go to. I have the rest of the show to go to. Kellyanne Conway, I appreciate you coming on to share your views.
Ask Chuck Schumer why we don't have cabinet secretaries approved. We nominated 21. They've approved 2.
I will, among the questions I have for him.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kellyanne Conway. Coming up, the man many down.
So there again, you saw Kellyanne Conway questioning her relationship with Chuck Todd. I don't know if that's going to be the way the Trump administration deals with the media. It's kind of a corollary to my question earlier about the reasoning behind CNN not getting Kellyanne Conway or Reince Preibus or anyone else from the Trump administration on the first Sunday of the Trump administration, and that was something Jake Tapper pointed out, and it might be related to the fact that they broke the Russian dossier story that included this, they didn't actually mention the golden shower allegations, but that's one of the things that was in there, and then that gave BuzzFeed supposed license to go ahead and actually publish the golden shower and other allegations, and it's why Donald Trump told Jim Acosta, the CNN reporter, during his only press conference in the last 6 months, basically, last several months anyway, saying CNN is fake news. And anyway, is that what the whole reassessment of our relationship comment from Kellyanne Conway is supposed to mean, that Donald Trump is going to punish members of the media who question the alternative facts that the Trump administration puts out? I don't know. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section, but the last part of that clip was Kellyanne Conway asking Chuck Todd to ask the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer about why Representative Pompeo has not been confirmed as the director of the CIA yet, and true to his word, Chuck Todd actually did ask that question of Chuck Schumer, and I wanted to put that in this section since it's right after that clip at the end of which Kellyanne Conway asked for this question. So here's the answer on NBC's Meet the Press this morning here.
Before the election, Chuck Schumer assumed the Democrats would win back the Senate, and that as majority leader, he'd be getting to work enacting President Hillary Clinton's agenda. Well, fast forward to today, and the president is named Trump, and Senator Schumer is the minority leader, not enacting the new president's agenda, but in a position to frustrate it. Senator Schumer joins me now. Senator, let me start with a question that I was going to ask you, and it's one that Kellyanne Conway, the counselor for the president, obviously wanted to ask you. Why hold up Mike Pompeo's nomination for a weekend? It seemed as he's going to get confirmed tomorrow. Why be that? It does look politically petty.
Well, actually, no CIA director has been confirmed the day of inauguration. The CIA is in very good hands. The number 3 guy is running it. In fact, I suggested to the vice president on Wednesday that have Brennan stay. He'd be willing to stay. He's devoted to the agency. There are very serious questions about Mike Pompeo. One of the great disputes we've had in the Congress over the years, Republicans and Democrats, not partisan, on each side of this, is security and liberty. And because senators want to have a real discussion of that. It just came out yesterday that Mike Pompeo might consider going against waterboarding. Just came out yesterday. So to have a discussion for a few days when this man will have enormous power and be in office maybe for up to 4 years makes eminent sense. Advise and consent doesn't mean ram it through.
I'm sorry, the waterboarding, I watched the Pompeo confirmation hearing. The waterboarding question was asked and answered. And he said in front of everybody there under oath that he was not in favor of it.
Yeah, but in the questions that just came back Friday, he said he'd consult some of the experts. There seemed to be a backtracking, and this is why we have to have some discussion.
So what does that mean? Is it going to get voted on tomorrow?
Yeah, it'll get voted on tomorrow, and in all likelihood he'll pass.
All right, but in all honesty, what discussion? I mean, it just seems like a petty delay tactic, because what discussion is left?
Chuck, that is silly. Okay?
Well, no, that's what I mean. What's the discussion?
Okay,
when do you have
Senator,
time for discussion?
There's plenty of, this is a debate on the floor. They did not want to have any debate on the floor. Sometimes people are persuaded by the debate on the floor. Senator Wyden, for instance, has very serious questions. It does no harm, none, to have that debate and vote Monday night.
All right, let me ask you about your relation.
So that's Chuck Schumer giving a somewhat reasonable explanation for why Representative Pompeo hasn't been confirmed as director of the CIA. I mean, it is a little bit of slow walking, but after 8 years of Republican obstructionism, waiting till Monday instead of Friday to confirm the director of the CIA, that's not that big a deal. And I think it may have something to do with the way Trump was attacking the intelligence community and the CIA, and especially John Brennan. You heard Chuck Schumer mention how he really wanted John Brennan to stay on for a few more days, and maybe that's what's really behind all this. But I want to move on to another Kellyanne Conway clip. This is from CBS's Face the Nation, where John Dickerson, actually all three shows, I'm not going to show the ABC clip where George Stephanopoulos tried to get Kellyanne Conway to answer that same question about the crowd size, although I'll have one Kellyanne Conway clip from ABC a little later on the supposed feud or lack of feud with the intelligence community. But here you have John Dickerson asking Kellyanne Conway about the crowd size issue in sort of a more nuanced way, or a sort of it's not as aggressive as Chuck Todd. This is sort of the passive aggressive way, saying this is right after Kellyanne Conway was talking about Obamacare and what Trump's going to do about that. And so John Dickerson says, well, why didn't Sean Spicer come out and talk about that instead of the crowd size? And he tries to get an answer to that, and she doesn't really answer. Over in the CBS clip from Face the Nation this morning here.
Crushing burden for them.
Let me ask you, yesterday the White House press secretary went out and gave a press conference. Why didn't he talk about this, which, as you point out, is such an important issue? Millions of Americans hanging to find out what their healthcare system is going to be like. Isn't that more important than the question of crowd size, which is what Sean Spicer was talking about?
Well, our press secretary, Sean Spicer, will be addressing Americans on any number of issues, including the ones I've just said on your show, John. Yesterday, it's just disappointing to get into this argument about crowd control. Nielsen says 31 million people witnessed Donald Trump's inauguration on the television. We know many other millions of Americans are watching events like this on different screens and their telephones and their computers. And we know there was a prediction of rain, a big rain out that probably deterred many people from coming. But all that said, there were hundreds of thousands of people here.
In terms of,
we all saw it. I think, I'm into the things that we can quantify, and that does go to everything from the 2,600 counties he won, 31 to 50 states, and the millions who are in need that he's going to help.
But that's in the past. I guess he's now doing things that affect real people, their real lives. No more rhetoric. This is real stuff. So why on a day when you could talk about when you can talk about a thing that the new president has done, the White House chooses to spend its political capital and its time on something that's quite petty relative to the big changes he's going to make in American health care?
I think it's a symbol for how we're covered and treated by many in the press, John, and that's unfortunate. Look what happened the day before. The very day before, we invited the press in to cover President Obama signing executive orders in the Oval Office. And what happened immediately? A false report, I'm sorry, this is very important, a false report was issued by the press pooler, and it went out to 3,000 and some outlets, 3,000 stories, and it was false that there was the removal of Martin Luther King Jr.'s bust in the Oval. That is just false. It was sitting right there. I was in the room.
Let me ask you a quick question.
You can't have false reports like that and expect us to not wonder why we're covered and treated so differently and unfairly.
But it just seems that it's a question of proportion. The president himself went to the CIA and thanked all the people there, said he was behind them 1,000%, but then went off and talked about crowd size. Aren't there more important things to talk about at the CIA for the new president of a nation of 320 million people?
Well, he did talk about important things, and frankly, him going to the CIA at all represents how serious he is about having.
So you can see there the CBS version. John Dickerson took sort of a bank shot approach to the Sean Spicer falsehood about crowd size, and just said, instead of going the way Chuck Todd did after Kellyanne Conway over and over again, why the falsehood, he tried the softer version of, why not something more important like Obamacare? And you heard pretty much parts of the same answer she gave to Chuck Todd on Meet the Press. I want to show the Fox News version. They didn't have Kellyanne Conway, but they had Reince Preibus, the incoming, or now he's chief of staff for Donald Trump. I still said incoming, but Donald Trump is president. Can't forget that. So Reince Preibus is now chief of staff to Donald Trump, president of the United States. And this is a clip where Chris Wallace over on Fox News Sunday does sort of what Chuck Todd did on Meet the Press. But you notice the Sean Spicer clip he shows doesn't include all the falsehoods. he doesn't say, I think he says only 2 things he said were false instead of 4 or 5 or whatever. I can't remember the exact number in this clip. And he starts off, like I said, not showing the completely false Sean Spicer clip, but he does eventually show 2 different pictures that, you know, from 2009 and 2017, showing the difference in the crowd size. And so they didn't show this in the Fox News report I showed at the beginning of the divisiveness category, but they did finally show it to Reince Preibus, and in a somewhat softer way still try to get him to admit that Donald Trump was wrong about the crowd sizes, as I will discuss after we watch that clip together from Fox News Sunday together.
With Sean Spicer's extraordinary press briefing late yesterday afternoon, where he excoriated reporters for their stories about the relative crowd size at the Trump inauguration, and said they should instead be talking about Democratic delays to the confirmation of Trump nominees. Here he is.
That's what you guys should be writing and covering. That this, instead of sowing division about tweets and false narratives, the president is committed to unifying our country, and that was the focus of his inaugural address. This kind of dishonesty in the media, the challenging that bringing about our nation together, is making it more difficult.
Then Spicer walked out without taking a single question from reporters. Reince, President Trump said in his inaugural address that every decision he makes will be to benefit American families. How does arguing about crowd size do that?
Because it's really not about crowd size. What it's about is honesty in the media. What it's about is, from day one after winning this election and President Trump talking about bringing America together, having a unified American public around unified ideas, not Republican or Democrat, he's ready to get to work. However, the media from day one has been talking about delegitimizing the election, talking about the Russians, talking about everything you can imagine except the fact that we need to move this country forward. Now, we get done with the inauguration. First thing out of the media is that President Trump removed the bust of Martin Luther King Jr. out of the Oval Office. This is an explosive accusation, which could have had incredible ramifications given the history of the press on this subject matter. Turns out that it was completely false. I walked back into the Oval Office, saw the MLK bust there, and what did the media say? The media said, oh, our bad, someone was standing in front of the bust, we didn't see it. Can you imagine tweeting that President Trump removed the MLK bust? So that's the first day, day one. Not even, I mean, day like hour 3. Then the next day, they put a picture, it was a big story, before the speech actually began, showing all of this white space. Wasn't true. The New York Times then put a picture in the middle section showing the fact that the entire mall was completely full. The point is not the crowd size. The point is the attacks and the attempt to delegitimize this president in one day. And we're not going to sit around and take it. Sean's been doing press briefings every single day. This was a press...
this is his first one at the White House podium.
Press update. His first official press briefing for Q&A, and the press can ask him a million questions, is going to be on Monday.
You talk about honesty and say that this was about honesty. Well, there's another issue here, though, Reince, and that is the president's honesty, because 2 things that he said yesterday were just flat wrong, and I want to talk about them. First, crowd size. I'm going to put up, take a look at these pictures. We got monitors here.
There's another picture.
Let's take a look at those pictures. On the left, you've got the Obama inaugural crowd. On the right, you've got the Trump inaugural crowd. Which one is bigger?
Listen, you're also not saying that picture was taken before he was even speaking. I mean, you can. I can take a picture of the mall.
I was there in the mall. I mean, let me say first of all, I think this is a ridiculous conversation.
Right.
But there were huge areas. He said that there were crowds all the way to the Washington Monument.
There was.
Right?
I was sitting there. Yes, there was. I was sitting there looking. Look,
I mean,
okay.
You know what? Put up the picture again.
This is,
folks. Put up the
picture again. You can keep putting the picture up, but I can take a picture. Look, wait a second. I can take an aerial picture right now, Chris. And I can say, look at the difference. If you're not comparing apples to apples, it doesn't matter.
I'm telling you that there were huge
you can keep telling me what you want to tell me.
All right,
the point is that instead of talking about the substance of what President Trump
You're the ones who did it.
said.
He could have given wait a minute. He could have given a news conference yesterday, talked about the agenda, talked about the signing, the executive actions he's going to sign, his legislative agenda. He talks about crowd size. Let me ask you about one other.
Wait a minute. Let's back up. We didn't tweet out that MLK Jr.'s bust was removed from the Oval Office. We didn't.
The reporter made a mistake. Wait a minute. The reporter made a mistake. He apologized, and Spicer sent him a tweet back saying, "Apology accepted."
Right. So these are the mistakes that are made. A reporter shoots first, aims later. I think the magnitude.
Are you saying there's a conspiracy here?
I'm saying there's an obsession by the media to delegitimize this president. And we are not going to sit around and let it happen. We are going to fight back tooth and nail every day and twice on Sunday.
Okay, let me talk about another thing.
So that's the Fox News version, and I think Chris Wallace did at least an adequate job of confronting Reince Preibus with the photos and trying to get an answer as to why the falsehoods, but not quite as strong as Chuck Todd. And I didn't actually show the ABC version. I showed the CBS version, which was sort of like the distraction version, where it's sort of like the misdirection version, or the passive-aggressive version is, I guess, what I said. But there was also an ABC version, which I'm not going to show. That was actually the last clip I want to show on the whole crowd size topic. So the last two clips I want to show are actually both from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, since I didn't show George Stephanopoulos questioning Kellyanne Conway on the whole crowd size issue, because it was somewhat duplicative of what Chuck Todd did, although Chuck Todd did it for like 10 minutes, so you can't really outdo that. That's why I chose the NBC version. Also because I always watch Meet the Press first, it airs first, and that's why I tend to have more clips from NBC's Meet the Press. But here's ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where George asked Kellyanne Conway about the false statements Donald Trump made when he talked at the CIA, and also brings up John Brennan criticizing Donald Trump for standing in front of this like wall of heroes. You'll see in the clips all the little stars behind Donald Trump represent dead CIA agents. That's why it's sacred ground, and he shouldn't be self-aggrandizing. And if you watched the CIA talk that Donald Trump gave, it was vintage Donald Trump, where he was basically being a narcissistic asshole, or whatever you want to say. But anyway, here's Kellyanne Conway discussing or answering questions from George Stephanopoulos on ABC this morning about the false things that Donald Trump said at the CIA and John Brennan's criticism over in this clip.
Did he choose to give that speech at the CIA yesterday, and why did he choose to have Sean Spicer make that kind of a statement?
I thought President Trump's speech at the CIA was remarkable, and he really went there to help with the swearing in of his CIA director, Mike Pompeo, who unfortunately has not been confirmed by the Senate yet, George. But the president decided to keep that on his schedule to go and build goodwill really on day one of his presidency with the CIA.
But why did he choose to not tell the truth about press reporting on his feud with the intelligence community? That reporting was based on the president's own statements.
The president went to the intelligence community yesterday to establish good relationships with them, and we had over 1,000 requests to attend. We can only accommodate a few hundred. He will be back. He got a standing ovation, and it's really time for him to put in his own security intelligence community. We really would prefer the intelligence community that's going out the door to be much more respectful toward the president and his vision in moving forward. We're not really thrilled with the leaks that have come out with the last several weeks or months. And we think in the interest of keeping us all safe, George, that the intelligence community that we saw on their feet yesterday welcoming President Trump for his rousing speech is the one that we look forward to working with.
You mentioned the outgoing officials. As a matter of fact, former CIA Director Brennan did put out a statement yesterday. Here's the statement from his aide, Nick Shapiro. Former CIA Director Brennan is deeply saddened and angered at Trump's despicable display of self-aggrandizement in front of CIA's memorial wall of agency heroes. Brennan says that Trump should be ashamed of himself. Your response?
I thought that was just an unremarkable, spectacularly disappointing statement from the outgoing CIA director. George, does that statement and the very vituperative language included therein, does that improve relationships with the intelligence community? We have an outgoing CIA director sounding like a partisan political hack about the president of the United States. I think everybody needs to take a step back and a very deep breath, George, and think about what their words are. You had President Trump in his inaugural address calling for unity, patriotism, giving America back to its people, its government back to its people. And we have the outgoing CIA director making a statement like that, using that type of vocabulary. How in the world does that improve relationships with our intelligence community? It was deeply disappointing.
While we're still
unnecessary.
While we're still on the intelligence community, several intelligence agencies and the FBI are now investigating.
So that was Kellyanne Conway explaining Donald Trump's weird self-aggrandizing speech. I agree with John Brennan. If you watch the entire 15-minute speech Donald Trump gave, there was one part where he talked about how he had this uncle who was this MIT professor and really smart, and so people should understand he's like a smart guy, and is Donald Trump an intellectual or something? There were weird things, and he talked about how he's gonna back the CIA so much they're gonna say, please don't give us so much backing, President Trump. And he also attacked the media and talked about the size of the crowds. And if you haven't watched it, it's definitely worth watching. It's on the youtube.com/White House website. The live stream is still there. The Trump administration hasn't. For the inauguration, they cut down the live stream into a edited video, but they haven't figured out how to edit down the video, or they're just not doing their job on the YouTube White House page. I can't. I don't even know how badly they're doing their jobs in other parts of the administration. But before I finish the broadcast, and I know I'm going pretty long already. Getting close to 2 hours, but the clips are almost an hour long, and this is the last clip, about a minute, where John McCain is on ABC's This Week. He's asked by George Stephanopoulos about this whole attack on the intelligence community, or what Donald Trump said in his speech, and what's really remarkable about what John McCain says here is he says he trusts the Trump cabinet, but he's not willing to say that he actually trusts the president, his Republican president, Donald Trump, as I will discuss after we watch that final clip together here.
Schumer weigh in on both the president's inaugural speech and that speech yesterday at the CIA. What's your take?
Well, my take is that obviously I disagreed with some of the things that the president-elect said, but the point to me is not what he's saying, because we keep reacting to just things he says in his tweets. What he is doing is important, and I have the utmost confidence in General Mattis, General Flynn, General Kelly, Dan Coates. I couldn't have picked a better team. And so I'm confident that he will listen to them and be guided by them. As far as this back and forth on his tweet, that's an endless rabbit hole.
You say you have utmost confidence in his team. Do you have utmost confidence in President Trump?
I do not know, George. I do not know, because he has made so many comments that are contradictory. But I think the fact that he's appointed and nominated these outstanding individuals is bound to be an encouraging sign. I trust them and believe in them, and I've worked with them over many years.
Finally, you also heard Senator Schumer.
So there, Senator John McCain basically saying, I think, that he trusts Governor Mike Pence, but and his transition, and Mike Pence has been in charge of a lot of these appointments, Donald Trump made the final decision, but it's really a more right-wing conservative, not weird, nationalistic, isolationist, Donald Trumpian, Trumpist type cabinet. And so Donald Trump is not trusted by John McCain, even though his cabinet apparently is. Did I say that was the final clip? Actually, I have, for the Sandy fans, I have a 9-second clip of Sandy licking her lips, getting ready for the clip roundup that I recorded right before I started. Here it is. So there you go for the fans of Sandy. I'm way over time, so I want to finish up, but if you want to help support my shows going forward, or all the videos I try to make. I did an additional live stream clip roundup on Friday and an edited produced video earlier in the week, so I've been very productive this week. If you want to help support that productivity when YouTube ad revenues don't really give me even minimum wage for the work I put in, you can click on this little eye here in the corner and give me direct YouTube fan funding, or click on the link down in the video description to become one of my patrons on Patreon. I appreciate all of the people who support me that way, or who support me just by giving me a thumbs up or posting a comment down in the video, in the comment section. I appreciate almost 300 live viewers this week. That's pretty cool. And help share my videos on social media or whatever you can do to give me encouragement, to help me keep up my motivation to make videos in the era of the Trump presidency. It's finally happened. This is my first Sunday clip roundup in the Trump presidency. So anything you can do to be supportive or help me out. And until I have some time to make some other edited produced video or some impromptu live stream, if something remarkable happens or something disturbing happens, kind of like Trump's inauguration, I'll be back to do that. And until next Sunday, when I may have a delayed program, may even get delayed till Monday because I have to spend like 4 or 5 hours doing my annual ACLU chapter orientation. So I may be late next week, but until next week, or until my next video, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.